So my name is Robert Doar, and I'm with the American Enterprise Institute, which is based in Washington. I am a fellow in poverty studies there, and our task is to provide information and guidance and analysis on issues concerning low-income Americans in a way that can help states and not-for-profits and others do a better job in helping people move up and out of poverty. Prior to coming to AEI, I was the Commissioner of Social Services in New York City and also in New York State. So I am, in some respects, a recovering bureaucrat, and I apologize for that. But I do want to associate myself both with Bill and Logan's remarks, because while I'm in Washington now looking at the federal picture, and I'm going to talk really from the big sort of how does the country look, the real action in poverty alleviation is in the localities, and the really effective action is among faith-based and community-based and not-for-profit organizations that do work like Bill's does at Georgia Works and others around the country. There are many, many organizations like that. I wish there were more. And then there's also the states and the local governments, and then there's the federal governments. And in some respects, the best, most effective is the local. States have a big role, and the federal government has a role as well, maybe not always in the right direction. What I want to point out about saying that distinction is that we can't ignore all three. It's not enough to say that we're not going to pay attention to the big federal programs because we don't like them or we don't believe in them and they're not going in the right direction. They're just such a big player in what we do, they have to be taken into account. And to the extent that we can improve them, we need to work on them. So first, I want to talk about where we are now in poverty in the United States. And so I guess which button, there we go. So here, this is the official poverty rate for the United States. And you'll see here, I'm focusing on the period 1990 to 2014. And you see a big divot there in that chart. And that reflects partly the effects of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act. Speaker Gingrich and Bill Clinton partnered on that important piece of legislation. And in subsequent years after the passage of that legislation, thankfully due to work requirements and other implemented policies, poverty plummeted down to 2000 and reached a point of less than 11% in the United States. Now, since then, as I think we've gone backwards in some respects, we've reversed, and now we're up back at almost 15%, back where we were. So welfare reform progress has been reversed in the country if you look at the official poverty measure. The one aspect of the official poverty measure that I want to be clear about is that it doesn't measure all of the supports that go into households. So it doesn't measure the extent to which people have tax credit benefits or food stamp benefits or public health insurance. So the material well-being of households who are classified as officially poor may actually be much better than is reflected by these numbers. Still, they're struggling, but they are, because of their receipt of some transfer program, they are not as significantly worse off with regard to their material well-being. But they are, it needs to be said, not earning their own success. They are not self-sufficient, and it can't possibly be true that when we started these programs that what we wanted to do was merely raise their material well-being and make them be a little bit better off materially. What we really wanted to do was to help them move up, take advantage of the opportunities our country offers, gain employment, and move out of poverty and be self-sufficient. So post-welfare reform progress has been reversed. Same trend in child poverty. Big drop. African-American child poverty in the United States reached an all-time low in 2000, is showing, I think, the effects of both strong work requirements in welfare, some work supports that made work pay, and a strong economy. But then those gains have been reversed in kind of a distressing way. Race gaps in poverty remain. African-American poverty rates are more than 25%, Hispanics slightly less than 25%. The all is at 15, as I mentioned, and for whites it's 10. I bring this up only to show that this is a space where I think we can do better. My father was the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Civil Rights Division during the 1960s. He worked for President Eisenhower, President Kennedy, President Johnson. He was very involved in the great changes that took place in our country in that time. And it partly motivated me to get into this business, to help in another way to help those who were less fortunate in our country. We had success in civil rights. We're not having success in poverty. Here is another way of looking at that same statistic. black poverty rates, and again, this goes from top to bottom, past to the current situation. So in 2000, black poverty rates were 17%. In 2006, they were 20, and in 2014, they're 25. For children poverty, they were 31. They then became 33. Now they're 37. Black median income, this is really distressing. Since 2000, black median income in inflation-adjusted dollars in the United States has dropped by $5,000. That's not a good progress. So what is going wrong? What's leading to this? To me, the big problem is that labor force participation, it is often always about work, has dropped. There's a lot of commentary about this in the newspapers, but there it is, and it is not moving. As unemployment has dropped and gotten better, the labor force participation, because people are out of the workforce, not looking for jobs and not earning their own success, has remained at really historic lows. Going back to the 1970s, we haven't had rates this low. Now, I would say, because I'm from the social policy world, that part of this is due to social programs replacing work with assistance that makes work less attractive. I believe that to be true, and I think that's true in our food assistance programs, in the Affordable Care Act, and in tax credits. So that's a big issue. The more people work, the less likely we're going to have poverty. In the United States, of all full-time, full-year workers, only 3% are in poverty. So work does pay off when it comes to poverty reduction, and to the extent that our policies are not encouraging more work, we're not going to be reducing poverty. The next issue that is a problem is the nominal birth rate. Now, here we are, we're now for all Americans, 40% of children are born into single-parent families. Last year, more than 50% of all of the children born to women under 30 were born into single-parent households. Now, I don't say this to stigmatize anyone or to embarrass anyone. I say it because in a whole host of measures of success for children, I'm a parent of 4 children, whether it's education, involvement with the criminal justice system, employment, earnings, family formation later in life, children who are raised in households with only one parent do less well. And we need to be honest about that and not offer a false promise that says a government program or a better school or this or that is going to resolve that problem. We need to be honest about this and say children need 2 parents. They need 2 active and involved parents who are involved in their raising in a stable way for their lifetime. And that's not happening in households that are begun in single parents. So that is a significant issue. And there are some things in government policy we can do, but one thing we definitely can do is talk about it and be honest about it and send the right messages about what children need to be properly, to have a greater chance of rising out of poverty. The next is kind of the bottom line for me. As someone who worked in social services, I joined the Social Services Department of the State of New York in the Child Support Enforcement Program right at the beginning of welfare reform. And I worked there for Governor Pataki, and then I spent 7 years working for Mayor Bloomberg as the commissioner of the largest municipal social services agency. We had everything. We had Medicaid, we had food stamps, we had cash assistance. And what I saw in that time in New York State, in New York City, was a transformation of the cash welfare program. So when we began in 1995, in New York City, there were 1.1 million recipients of cash welfare, that is getting a cash check. When I left the Bloomberg administration a year and a half ago, there were 360,000. So we had significantly reduced the extent of dependency on cash welfare. We increased the work rates for never married mothers and for other people who were likely to be in poverty. And we reduced poverty and then kept it at a lower level. It didn't rise quite to the extent it has in the country. But meanwhile, national policies increase these programs that provide assistance without a work requirement, and I think we've gone backwards. So when I look at what I think we need to do now, I summarize it in these 5 points. And I also want to make one other point before I get to these. I am in the social policy world, government programs that have to do with providing assistance or helping people move up. We have at AEI a whole other group that focuses on education, And I would say better schools and improved in education, greater choice, more charter schools is a key ingredient as well. But I'm focusing on what works in helping the poor in social services. So number one is work expectations. We have gotten away from work requirements and work expectations for people who ask for assistance. We need to get back to that. Secondly, we need to also acknowledge that there are some situations where a little additional support can make wages go further, keep people in the workplace, and raise their incomes and keep them out of poverty. So, but we have to do it in a way that always makes full-time work more attractive. And right now we're not doing that. Finally, we have to talk about two-parent families that are better to help children in life, and we need to talk about getting fathers more involved in children's lives in all kinds of ways. We need to have more effective programs for struggling men. I really was, what you saw with Bill's presentation is exactly the kind of thing that we need to really push, because this is the group in our society that is struggling the most right now. So much of our social welfare policy is directed at households with children in them who often has a single mother. So we do a lot in that regard, not always well, but we offer very little for the men associated with the children in that household, and we need to do more there. And then finally, we got to recognize, those of us in social services, that it's not all about us. It's also about a growing, prosperous, job-producing economy that makes opportunities flourish in our society. AEI is very focused on that in other contexts as well. I know that all of you are aware of that, but sometimes for people who work in this space, we don't recognize the extent to which it's very important that we have better than 2% annual GDP growth, because to the extent that our economy is freed up and people are able to offer jobs and provide jobs is a key ingredient in poverty alleviation. I was interested in the questioner before from an employer. There are a number of things that have happened in our country that have made it harder for employers to hire people, and when you make it harder for employers to hire people, you hurt low-income Americans trying to get a leg up and move up in society. So I want to just, I look forward to the questions and discussions. I do want to say that the AEI, I was in Indiana on Tuesday and in New Orleans last week. I spent a lot of my time going out, talking to people at state level, offering analysis, advice, take it or leave it. We have another colleague, a former commissioner of social services, Maura Corrigan, is also an AEI visiting fellow. We have Angela Rashidi, who is a policy analyst. We are trying to make real and concrete the commitment Arthur Brooks, who you will hear from at lunch, has said that for those of us on the right or conservative view of how public policy should be run in the United States, we need to be in this game, not only because Americans are looking for ideas on these issues, but because our ideas have a history of working more successfully than those that are more prevalent out there. And in the, you know, I've been in this business a long time, and one of the things I find is that, you know, there's people who are more likely to be for government dependence and government intervention often are attracted to poverty alleviation efforts and join the discussion. And those of us who are about freedom and about opportunity through employment and self-sufficiency and self-reliance often don't get involved in these issues. And that's unfortunate, because that leaves a vacuum that they can fill. So we are trying to fill that vacuum and provide a counterweight to the prevailing more government is always better view. And I hope that you will help us do that by giving us your ideas, your feedback, keeping our engagement with all of you continuing, because this is going to be a day-to-day engagement with American society to move us back toward a work-based welfare system that reduces poverty and improves opportunity for all Americans. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.